Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. We have a returning guest, Miss Marjory Wildcraft, who is going to be giving us all instructions and things about how to be self-dependent and growing your own food and helping your community in that regard going forward as the iterations of the wealth transfer continue onward. If you're new to the podcast, please do like, subscribe, and share. Helps the channel grow and others to gain in the knowledge you're currently being afforded. Ms. Wildcraft has decades of experiences in growing her own food. She even has books and an online podcast that helps articulate how to do this, whether you're one person or you have an entire community. We had her on last month and we wanted to bring her back on again, and she's been gracious to join us once again for the discussion. Marjory, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, John. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me back on. Eating, we like to do it at least twice a day, right?
Exactly. And if we can do it well and cleanly, all the better. And
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my
you
gosh.
know,
There's nothing in the grocery stores. We used to say you could be a perimeter shopper. None of that. It's no longer true. You got to grow your own or have trusted local sources. So yeah.
agreed. I agree completely. Well, let's start with that because that seems like a good place to start. Here we sit in almost the middle of November. Can you believe it? We have Thanksgiving up
No.
there. I know. Well, that's, we're time. God is moving quickly. We're just a little over 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, which is always, a meal is always the topic of the centerpiece. People, have more honest conversations when they break bread. So it becomes a centerpiece for that, as you know. We
Mhm.
just recently had a situation with, you're talking about the grocery store, where I think it was a cautionary tale of this, not fear, just, awareness and proactivity in the aspect that SNAP benefits were stopped for about a week, and now they're being resumed. But he's using tariffs to do it, and not the Federal Reserve money, which is good. But it speaks to the overarching issue of not being dependent on the government, or we're the government of other people, to feed yourself or to sustain and to live well. What, in your estimation, did the SNAP pullback do for people, and how significant do you think that is going forward?
Well, I think it's hugely significant, and it's a huge red flag. It's a big wake up call for everybody. Now, the people who are on SNAP benefits, um, chances are they're not going to grow food. It's very interesting that a lot of them are just not in that kind of mind. A lot of them are in an entitlement like mindset. Um, I think it's a big wake up call for all of us that the U.S. government can do whatever they want whenever they want. Things can be pulled at any moment's notice. The food supply that comes from supermarkets is, it's not a reliable source of food. And we live in really, really, really precarious times. Now, I'm really glad they got some, they got the payments back and they reassured people, and the massive amount of looting that was predicted didn't happen, which is a good thing. But that could have turned very, very nasty. And if you're at all familiar with the survival genre of books, used to read a bunch of them, they almost always start in Atlanta when the food stamps aren't paid, right? And then the rioting breaks out and it spreads on from there. Um, we're seeing this, right? This is now they pulled it back and it's going to be okay, but this is going to happen again. The other thing about it is, regardless of whether the payments keep coming or not, we have inflation and hyperinflation on the docket, right? So there are going to be that 42 million Americans that are already waiting and needing help with subsistence that are not going to be getting it one way or another here going forward. So you need to take that as a huge wake up call.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you said that, Marjorie, because that was actually a good, without you knowing it, a good segue to my kind of follow-up question to this is, I have a gentleman coming on tomorrow. We've talked about this when we talked on the phone a few weeks ago in anticipation of this podcast. I have a friend who has been with, Schwab for nearly 30 years. You have somebody that you know in your financial world. And so they don't know each other, but they know us, and the conversations intersect nicely in that we are seeing the first quarter of next year, as President Trump transitions us into the new asset-backed system where we should have been from all the beginning, and removing the Federal Reserve and all that. He cannot do it with 100% smoothness. There has to be some bumps in the road. So we're seeing a major crash coming up. in the first quarter of next year, most likely by, we believe, somewhere thereabouts, February, March. But it'll be in the first quarter, because if he's going to, bring in this new system, which he's doing right now, and it's going to continue next year, there has to be a transitory process, and that isn't a smooth one. So I think to what you're speaking about a moment ago fits into that pretty well. What do you think?
That's very interesting that you've come up with that time frame, because also looking at the markets, which I do aside from growing food, people don't realize I made my first million before I was 40. And because I teach growing food was basically because I got directions to do that and not focus on making money anymore. But I'm looking at the markets and I'm looking at the patterns, and this looks like the exact same setup in 1999 and 2000 with the dot-com run up and then pop. And so yeah, that February timeframe looks like a really, really sweet spot for when they will collapse the market. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to recognize that the stock market is completely overblown,
Oh,
right? I
yeah.
mean, pretty much every indicator you look at, everybody you talk to, it's not a matter of when, it's if. Are they going to do it tomorrow? Is it going to be next week? I'm actually thinking that first quarter also. And you're right. There's a lot of things strategically being moved in that direction. It's so unfortunate. I saw a statistic a little while ago that of the millennials that have savings, 85% of their savings is in the stock market.
Mm.
And these kids have never been through, you know, I mean, they've seen the plunge protection team always bring that thing back up again. I mean, the markets have been manipulated, and
Yeah.
it goes down a little bit, but then they always bring it up. And they're not going to bring it up this time because, as you're right, there's a whole nother agenda that's going on that's a much bigger game than your average, market up and down and manipulation. So when that happens, things get very, very, very gnarly. My bookkeeper, my dear friend Mary, we've known each other for 30 years. She says, well, it'll be okay for those kids because, if they just hold on to it, it'll come back again. But I'm like, no,
Mm-mm.
those companies go bankrupt and they go out of business. They never come back again. We're talking about a major, like we're going to ground zero type experience, and supply chains will get ruptured and distribution systems will get damaged and destroyed. Your ability to feed yourself could very well become a whole new level of difficult and expensive.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in what you just shared, Marjorie, because I know I'm talking to you, like me, I'm a metal stacker and other things. So are you, and have been for many, many
Yeah,
decades, to your and wisely so. But you have a couple things. Let's break down, if you don't mind, before
sure.
I go to my next question with you, because I do have one I'm thinking ahead of, to ask you that's relevant to your specialty. The first thing is you have, okay, so you mentioned 99, 2000, right? The Y2K switch. Then you had 2008 into
Yeah.
2009. Do you remember when they said, oh, anybody with cash can get great deals? I remember that vividly. And I said, I'm never going to let that happen to myself again, because I took a bath on the house I had back east at that time, and I learned a lot from it, which thankfully I did it at a very young age to know better now. So I see that. My point being that I see the pattern of the 99 2000 in its second iteration was 0809. Now this is the third and final, I believe, we believe, iteration of that. So you take that, number one. Number two, you have this huge melt. You're in the height of the melt up, right? That proverbial bubble now, we believe, is going to get pushed out, from now till January 1. And at some point, it's going to be, and then it's done.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you want to be on, I always talk about it in terms of an analogy of landmines. You want to be on the right side of that landmine and not the wrong side when it blows up the other way. That's what we're trying to do with our audience. And they're a very well-heeled audience that wants to grow and learn, wants to get better like yours. And so it's almost impossible to not marry food and finance, because you just talked about SNAP. What do people spend most of their money on? Food, energy, transportation. If those three things are satisfied, people are calm. If they're not, there's chaos. So there's a direct correlation. So yeah, and it's interesting that we didn't have this conversation. I didn't script you or anything like that. This is off the cuff, extemporaneous. And you yourself studying the charts are seeing the exact same patterns we are. We're trying to find that commonality for our audiences to be proactive, prepared, and to win. That's the name of the game. I know you
Yeah.
would agree. So let's go back, with that being said, to another one of your milieus, which is, food growth and preparation and synergy
Yeah.
with the farms. I told you that, I have a project that God's put in my heart for Tennessee. I want to work with you on, and this marries well with that. So in the most simplest of terms, if someone's getting started like myself, somebody else who's a novice, and they want to go buy land, which we recommend, getting a water source and mineral rights, if it should have it on there. And they say, okay, I want to grow food, I want to do a greenhouse, got it. But they don't know how to build the relationships with the farmers in the area to be buddies, for poultry, for meat, for eggs, that sort of thing. What would be the best on ramp for them to do that?
Yeah, well, the best thing to do is start feeding your family from your neighbors like that. So there's farmers markets. Weston Price has different meetup groups. It's getting good quality food now is almost a black market. But if you start asking around, you'll find that. And you want to do that right now. In fact, sometimes I buy food I don't even need and I'll give it to somebody else because I want to support the farmers. And I'll give you one perfect example. So there's one farmer we have locally grows these beautiful meat chickens, right? Which is not something I do. I raise rabbits, but he grows these beautiful meat chickens. And and I would always buy, you know, some meat chickens from him, right? When 2020 came around and the lockdowns happened, he had people texting him pictures of their kids saying, "You've got to sell me food. You've got to sell me food." And he's like, "Where were you 6 months to a year ago when nobody was buying anything?" So I said, "Hey, Chris, do you got any chickens?" And he said, "Yeah, I got a chicken for you. You've been buying from me for 2, 3 years. You've been supporting me, right? So you need to support those farmers right now." And you want to be on the top of their list of people that you know. I mean, I even go a lot further than that. I say, "What do you need?" There's one farmer that I know that he's trying to restore some equipment. He says it's all triple phase and I only have a single phase house. I said, "Hold on, I think I have a machine that can convert that for you. Let me look around and see if I can find it." There was another farmer, they just bought their land. They didn't have enough money left over. I said, "Here's a few $1,000s." And they ended up buying a school bus so that they could live in that until they could build their house. That's the kind of thing that you want to do in addition to be consistently buying from them. You want to support them because they are producers. And we really are headed into a time we're at war. Like a lot of people don't realize that we're at war. And one thing that always goes with war is famine. And it is coming. You can already see the edges of that when you go to buy hamburger and eggs at the grocery store.
It's no, it's true. We're in an informational and supply war. I would, to add to your point, and they, again, they go hand in hand. I mean, as I said to you, in Tennessee, one of the first things I want to do once I buy land is go make buddies with the farmers, because my vision was always to, these folks work so hard and so long, and they're competing against these Monsanto GMO farms who had the NWO backing and all that to give them the edge to poison people. Now we can, as a community, get the wealth and the purchasing power to do what you said, counteract that. And so conversely, I want to make friends with them and say, what do you need? How can I support you financially so that you guys can do the same quality work in less hours, have more time with your family, which is good for them too in their personal lives, not just in their professional lives. Takes the edge off a little bit, because if one spouse isn't seeing the other, it brings the kids together. There's more harmony and congruency. So I'm right in line with you on that. I think that's critically important. I'm glad you said that. Now I want to show you something, Marjory. We talked about this offline a little bit, so you're somewhat familiar, but it's a wild card that I think is an enhancement to what you and this community are going to do and need. So let me just pull this up real quick. If you just bear with me a second, I want to show you this. I think we talked about this. Remember Flo, about harvesting honey? There's a lot of discussion now about lack of the bees obviously pollinate the land. When I pray in the morning, I thank God for the birds, because the birds create a frequency that opens up the animals of the land, including the bees and all that. But there's this real, I don't know if we're at a point of epidemic yet, or we could be traversing that, but we're at a point where protecting the bees and all of the support of bees and not just honey, but pollination of the plants that growing the food is of a concern. And this one company, Flow, is helping with that in terms of becoming a beekeeper, supporting beekeepers. How important is that to your everyday livelihood? And where do you see us in the flow of things in terms of the bee pollination being potentially a crisis?
I would say not only the bees, but pretty much all the insects. We are in crisis. There is hardly, I mean, when I was a kid growing up, we would go on the family drive from, and albeit I lived in Florida, but we'd go from like Miami to Jacksonville or something like that, or St. Augustine, and we would have to stop and clean off the windshield pretty regularly because there was just always insects all over the place, right? You go on a trip and there's just there's hardly any insect life anymore, and it's not just the bees; it's everything. No, as a human, it kind of makes life a little bit more pleasant. It's actually a huge problem though, because we're not having, the insects are a huge food source. There's a whole chain for which they are the bottom layer of that. So many, the birds themselves eat. There's so many things, lizards and all kinds of things that eat the fish, eat insects that need them for those, like that's the base layer of the food chain. So yeah, I love that company Flow, and beekeeping is a wonderful, wonderful activity, and that's I teach in that free webinar at Backyard Food Production the three basic components that you need to get started, and where you can grow half of your own food in a backyard size space in a very short period of time, and then once you get those three dialed in, because they're going to get you the most calories, I recommend all kinds of, and beekeeping is absolutely one of them. I used to be a beekeeper and I love it. And you can't go wrong with honey. It's medicinal. It's sweet. It has incredible shelf life. And then again, producing the bees and encouraging the bees and helping the bees is that is a really great part of helping to keep our ecosystems alive. But yeah, I would say the bees are critical. All of the insect life is critical. And another way that you can support that is if you have any extra land. Here I'm in Puerto Rico, and these guys come with a weed whacker and they call it clean, and they cut everything down to the nubbins. And like, leave some wild patches with wildflowers or weeds, what we considered weeds, leave some areas that are just untended, and you'll see that all kinds of things will grow there and flowers will be there. You'll see way more insect life being attracted to that. So it's very simple to just make a little area that's wild, even if you only have a small backyard, just a couple square feet. Just let it be a wild area with things that grow up by themselves to
Mm.
support the insect life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that, Marjorie. And then that, as you were talking, I was starting to think that creates an inverse discussion, right? Because everybody that I know that grows food, one of the biggest challenges problematically is that, well, the deer eat all my plants and the insects eat this and that, I can't grow this because of that. What is, in your experience, the best, safest, and most, from an efficacy standpoint, way for people to grow plants without insects or wildlife attacking them and actually being able to grow and harvest the
Yeah.
food?
Well, actually, for deer, I found the best thing to have is a couple of dogs. They love running the deer off. That's my favorite. I like medium-sized dogs. Too small, and you're not going to get efficacy. Too big, and you have to come up with the food for the dog. So I found
Right.
medium-sized dogs I could feed easily, and they would run deer off, as well as raccoons and coyotes and all other kinds of stuff. Now, the plants themselves. So a very simple principle in nature: weak human beings will be attacked by whatever, right? So if you're a weak human being within a weak immune system, you're going to get sick. That's just what happens. And the same thing is true for the plant kingdom. And like, so as human being, if you don't have vitamin C, you're going to get scurvy. If you don't have vitamin D, there's a whole complex of things that can go wrong. If you don't have iron, you're going to have all kind. You're going to have low energy. You're not going to be able to metabolize oxygen well. There's a whole, right? The same thing is true with the plants, and plants need nutrition, and they need vibrant, alive soil. And a lot of people think of soil as just dirt, don't get it in the house, cheaper than dirt, soil is unbelievably important. You need really rich, well mineralized, fertile, vibrant, alive, living soil with a lot of microorganisms in it. And the way you get that is through, composting manures, composting leaves, taking things that you would normally consider waste, and you can extract the minerals from them with a composting process. And so, you really need this whole thing going on, whether you're doing it in a backyard or whether you're doing it on a larger scale. But I've seen it over and over again. When your plants are healthy and strong, yeah, you'll get a little insect damage, but not much. And also the water, you won't need to be as strict about water because the soil will hold and retain water better. And there used to be a wonderful slide that one of my mentors had, and he had this whole row of these beautiful yellow squash, all of them healthy and vibrant, except at the end, this one was completely being devastated by insects. He says that plant was really, really weak. And then once they devoured that plant, all the others were so strong that they didn't, the insects went away. There's I don't know whether it's electromagnetic frequencies or what other frequencies, but when a plant is healthy and strong, it is much more resistant to insect attacks. So people thinking, oh, there's insects, I got to spray it and kill it. That's a wartime mentality. That's a pharmaceutical mentality. You need to get into a more of a systems, ecosystem, earth nature understanding, and that is, if I support my plants with the nutrition that they need, they'll be healthy.
Absolutely. Well, that also goes back, Marjory, to what I talk to my audience about a lot is the mindset shift, not just financially, but everything that you do and the food you eat, the way you grow the food, the people whom you consort, where you go. It has to be an attitudinal, a mental shift that has to happen before the action actually takes place, right? And so I think your little tips and tricks, excuse me, hacks, will go a long way to helping people. I love the idea what you said about dogs because I want to when I have land, get a golden retriever because I've always wanted one as a kid. My parents wouldn't take the
I would really recommend two dogs, and
okay,
here's why.
sure.
Because dogs are pack animals. They love being in packs. And if you have one dog, you are its main pack, right? It's going to want to be with you. It's going to want to sleep with you. It's going to want to be with you. But if you have two dogs, then they know that they're a dog pack. Now they're going to look to you to be the alpha dog and all that, but they're more likely to be going out and working. You need them to work at night, especially, and you need your dogs to be outside working. And they're
Mhm.
more likely to work if there's two of them and they understand that they're a dog pack that is separate from the humans. And because you want to, it's not a pet. I mean, I love my dogs. I love my cats. I mean, there's a wonderful, loving relationship, and they're working animals. They have a job and a function to do. And actually, dogs are far superior to humans to protecting, livestock and crops. They have way better hearing. They have way better smell. They enjoy it. They want, most of the dogs, they want to work. They want to have meaningful work, and they love doing it. They love running off these critters and protecting areas. That's what they want to do. But yeah, I would recommend getting two.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Is there any specific breed that you recommend over another?
I really like the livestock. I like two things. One is livestock guardian breeds, which since you're in Tennessee, the Pyrenees would be a great, because they have that thick coat, right? Here in Puerto Rico, that would be terrible for them. I also am a real big fan of mixed breeds because I found that it is true that the mixed breeds generally tend to be smarter. I've often found that dogs out of a shelter, they really appreciate a human being as an owner that they can have a relationship with, because God knows what they have just been through, and you have rescued them from that situation. And I found that with dogs and cats, they really, really are very, very grateful for that. My preference was always some kind of Pyrenees mix, and I like that because the Pyrenees that's what they do. They protect livestock. That's what they have been bred for many, many centuries. They also have a very calm demeanor. They're not going to be excited and jump up in people's laps and stuff like that. They're very calm, good natured dogs, which is what I'm looking for. Um, So, but almost any of the livestock guardian dog breeds. Unfortunately, a Labrador Retriever is more of a retriever dog, which is a different. They serve a different function.
Yeah, absolutely. Good tip. Thank you for that. Not in Tennessee yet, but I'm working towards that in the near future for sure. But I like that you said that because I'm already mentally there myself. So I get that. And, yeah, I think it's a really good point about, again, the breeds and having a sort of an ahead of the curve mentality so that you can anticipate certain things that you might not have otherwise if you weren't, preparing that direction. One of the many reasons I want to bring you back on, Marjory, is because of liking you and your knowledge being invaluable, is that my concern with my audience in general was so myopically financial, which is not bad, it's good. But if they're not planning ahead of what to do with that money, how to prepare, to protect, to be proactive, other than just blessing people, they're putting themselves at a deficit. Too often, I think people tend to be sort of polarized in their view of, it's just financial, or it's just geopolitical, or it's just the kids. And I think all of them have a place of importance. And so, I the last time I brought you on, I was a little disappointed because I thought that we would get more of a reaction. Hopefully, sometimes people need to see you a couple of times and get familiar. I get that. But I'm
Yeah.
hoping this time they'll latch on to the importance of, hey, when I get my wealth, I really need to start, making these plans. And what Marjorie's saying is good because that's where I was thinking. And it gives them resources of, where to go.
Well, let me help you with the wealth and
Please.
financial conversation. And so most of the times we think of wealth, and I always did. I mean, I made a lot of money, right? We always think of wealth as money. It's stocks, it's cars, it's houses, it's property, right? And the biggest lesson that I've learned in my life is wealth is way more than that. And the number one asset that you have that you had better invest in is your own physical body and your health, right? I mean, if you have a whole bunch of money but you're on an IV, that's no fun at all, right? So and you cannot be healthy if you're eating from the grocery stores. I am sorry, there is no nutrition in that food and it's loaded with toxins. So you just can't. You have to eat what you have to be a fanatic now if you want to be healthy. And no, organic is not going to do it. I mean, that's great, but the organic brand got usurped a long time ago by the USDA. It's now big corporations that produce all that stuff. One example, Bill Gates with the appeal stuff. So they spray this stuff on an apple, and the apple will have like a shelf life of like years, right? It's some chemical or something very nasty. That has now been admitted into the organic standards. You know, like they allow all kinds. So organic doesn't mean anything except for that you're going to pay more and there might be a little less toxins. So you cannot eat. You cannot eat from the grocery store. You need to be shopping at the farmers markets. You need to be befriending farmers, and really, ultimately, you need to be growing your own food. And people go, I know I might turn into a migrant worker. Like growing food is so beneath me, or you know, you know, I'm going to tell you the process of growing food is way more healthier than the high quality food that you eat. The gentle movements, being outside in the sunlight, being engaged with earth and water. That is real wealth. And doing that every day, listening to those birds. I love that you like the birds. Just being engaged with what's going on. And it doesn't take, I mean, I specialize in teaching people in a very small plot of land um, how to do this. And I actually did a whole series of interviews with extremely, wealthy or accomplished people. These were like CEOs of companies with 25 million in A round funding, or one was an executive with an insurance company with a division of 2,000 employees. And they all had one characteristic, and that is they spent anywhere from a half an hour to an hour a day in their backyard growing food. Now, these people could afford anything they want. Like the money was not the reason. They did it partly because they wanted the nutrition. You can't get that kind of quality food or freshness or flavor from grocery stores. But the other was it just calmed them down so much from their high stress jobs. And it was so much more beneficial to their health that they grew food. So, I we need to shift this conversation that wealth and finance is all about money. It's not. It's about your health. And at this stage in the game, and I do envision a future where we will go and there will be wonderfully grown, beautiful, nutritious, healthy food.
Hmm. Hmm.
But we are years, if not decades, away from that. And right now, if you want to survive this next time period, and if you want to be mobile and healthy and clear and cognizant in your elder years, you need to be growing food or buying food from farmers right now and
Yeah.
completely shifting your diet.
And not just survive, Marjorie, but to your point, thrive. We have an opportunity to be a part of that new 1%. So, you're absolutely right. And just to my before my last question for today, because I know you're busy, you mentioned earlier about the young kids, 85% of the millennials and Gen Z, whatever, being in the stock market, which crazy because I usually think of that audience being more in the crypto space, and there are some of that too, but then you take the other side of the equation you're talking about. My parents' generation and older generations, the nearly retired or the retirees, a lot of them have pensions, 401ks, and they were inculcated and brainwashed to think stock market, 401 pension, the government will take care of you, blah, blah, blah. And they're about to find out that was a complete canard fallacy. So there will be a need for an awakening on both sides of the age and life spectrum. So with the last question, we talked a lot about some of the challenges, pitfalls, and the important dire need to be proactive. What are some of the things you're seeing that you do like from society in this awareness space? What takeaways in a positive direction do you have?
Well, I am seeing a lot more people becoming very aware of, for example, of privacy issues and the need to like maybe have a de-Googled phone or get on Linux. We're seeing more and more conversations. People, actually, as kind of sad as this sounds, but there's so many 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds that are coming down with diseases that you would normally only see when somebody was 60 or 70. 30 years old with heart disease, or 30-year-old with Crohn's disease, or something like that, or cancer. And that's horrible. But the upside of it is they're going, hey, wait a minute. Uh, I really need to reevaluate what I've been taught, what I've been eating, what have I been doing. And there is a real movement of people into health. I mean, really looking into what it really takes to be healthy. And so I'm very, I'm uplifted about that. I as crazy as these times are, I think they're also really beneficial. Like, everybody knows that the internet is basically gone to hell, right? Like, you can't believe anything on the internet, right? But what that means is you now need to step up and become responsible and start thinking like, is this image that I'm seeing actually real? Is this possible? Is what I'm doing making sense? Am I generally contributing to my community, or am I just taking? We need to really come into our own, and I believe that we're seeing that as these other systems fall apart. More and more people are going, hey, wait a minute, I'm realizing that it's up to me. So I think that this is a wonderful trend. We are seeing a lot more backyard food production going on. We're seeing a lot more people who are saying, I get it. I get it that, this whole food chain thing, not only is it toxic, but it's extremely vulnerable, and they want a little more control. So I'm
Hmm.
very happy about that.
Well, that's good to hear, at least. Thank you for that. Well, as we close up, Marjorie, as I do always with my guests, last words you have for the audience today of whatever you want to share, and where can people find your work?
Yeah. So backyardfoodproduction.com. If you're older, out of shape, you have no experience, I will show you how to grow half of your own food in a backyard size space. Um, and it'll be the best time you do. It'll be the best half hour you spend every day. It'll be the most pleasant thing. I set up that whole webinar for any, regardless of where you lived, and I've grown food in almost every climate you can imagine. And it's also set up. There's something you can do to get started today, regardless of what season it is. And I really want to encourage you to do it, because we are at war, and an army cannot fight on an empty stomach. If you're watching this podcast, you're one of the people that we really need to count on to be strong and to be a leader in your community as this whole thing unfolds. It is going to get very rough. And food, it's just one of those vital things. And the wonderful thing, it's really wonderful You'll feel great. It's super empowering to know you can walk by the egg section at the grocery store with your nose up in the air because you're growing your own eggs. And yeah, anyway, backyardfoodproduction.com, free webinar. I go fast, super empowering, and we'd love to see you there. Anybody who needs help, please reach out. I'd be more than happy to help you.
Absolutely. And we'll also provide the link we did last time for the organic seeds in Texas that people need to get started. We'll put that as well right here, right here in the video in the description for you. So thank you, Marjory Wildcraft, joining us, backyardfoodproduction.com. Thanks for all of your cogency, insight, wisdom, knowledge, and humility to help the people. We genuinely appreciate it. And we pray that this really does foster a seed in people's heart to go forward. Thanks for joining us. God bless, and we'll see you next time.